What of?
Shabbat Tov.
Hello, Peggy. How are you?
Yeah.
Hi, Bernie.
Hi, Shabbat Tov.
Shabbat Tov.
Okay, get my material.
I think we're in Perek Bay's Pasuk Yud Aleph or Yud Beis?
Yes, that's where we stopped.
Yeah.
Hi, Johnny. Is Johnny in New York?
I know I'm here in town. Thank you. Got back Thursday.
Johnny, you're awake, Johnny.
So far.
Next Sunday, we're not gonna do it.
Okay, so Susie and I are going to Israel this week, so we're not going to have a shiur
Next Sunday.
next
Next Saturday night,
Saturday night, but we'll resume again
right
in
after.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from now.
Meretz Hashem, God willing.
So I just want to, Esther was really an orphan. We learned that her father died when her mother was pregnant, and her mother died in childbirth. So she was mamish born an orphan. So that when we talked about Mordechai growing breasts to feed her, this is a metaphor. You could learn it both ways, but it's Mordechai took care of her. This was a relative. Remember, it's a niece. And we said there are those that say that he did not marry her, that she was for various reasons. Some say he married her particularly because Achashverosh was not going to take married women as part of this beauty pageant. But I want to go back to so he took care of her as an infant. And that's what's being highlighted by all of that. And then later on, 70 years later, when there's a lot of very attractive elderly women today. And when you say elderly, there's women in their 60s and 70s today with modern techniques, etc. You'd think that they're 30 or 40 or younger. And we're going to see that Esther was kept in a spa for 12 months where they treated her and this and that. So I don't think that's a major problem. But I think some people had some issues with that, but whatever. So let's start with Pasuk Yud Aleph. Uv'chol yom vayom, while Esther was in this harem, Mordechai was mishalech. Mordechai was walking about lifnei chatzar beis anashim, in front of the courtyard of this harem. Ladas shlom Esther uma yeyaseba, to find out what's going on with her. He didn't make it obvious that he was interested in Esther. Otherwise, that would have revealed her Jewishness, which we know she's hiding. That's why normally the word would be holech, but mithalech is more like strolling. He strolled around as if he's doing something else. And that the Me'am Loaz points that out, that in order to confuse the guards, that he's not really interested in Esther. The Medrash says, when it talks about Shlom Esther, Esther was asking halachic questions about Nida, about other halachic issues that needed to be addressed. Again, Mordechai and Esther both realized that something unusual is going on here. And the Maya Yaseba, what's going to happen with her, because they were predicting that she is going to be the instrument of some major Hatzalah, Hashem. Otherwise, why would this whole thing come about the way it is? Svi, we're on Pasuk Yud Aleph. We're in Pasuk Yud Aleph.
Thank you.
Rashi says, Maya seba, ze echad mishnei tzadikim shnitin lehem remez Yeshua. This is examples of two tzaddikim that were given a hint that there's some great Yeshua coming. David and Mordechai. David shenema. In Shmuel Aleph, Perek Yud Zayin, gam et ha'ari, gam et ha'dovi ka'avdecha. If you remember that David came across a lion and a bear, and he smote both of them. Amr lo bali de davar zeh lo l'smach alav v'lachem im zeh. This was a hint to him that he would fight with Goliath, with Goliath, and kill him. So that was a remez of a Yeshua that was coming. V'chein Mordechai, Amar lo lo ira l'tzadek azushi t'lakach l'mishkav orel. It has to be that this uncircumcised king is taking this Jewish girl as a wife. Ela shatida lokum lo shil Yisrael. Must be that she's going to save Klal Yisrael. Lefichach hayam mechazer ladas ma'yeh b'sofa. So he was hanging around to check what's going on, to see what's going to happen. I'll give you another thing that triggers in my mind who was hanging around. What about Miriam? In the house of Yocheved and Amram, remember? Moshe is born and a light it fills the whole house. They also had a remez that this young child is going to be maybe the Moshiach Shel Yisrael. So there also, I'm surprised Chazal didn't mention that one, but I see a remez there, that Miriam also was hanging around, l'deya ma'yeh aselo. Same thing.
Amlo also says that it could be that he was worried that had become depressed because she was surrounded by people who were jealous of her beauty, and she also didn't want to be there. He was resisting it. Right,
and the Malbim brings that, Bernie. He understood that she was b'sakon nefashos. She would show that she's unwilling. She's being forced to, because remember, we learned last week that all of this is happening because she's an anusa. She's being raped, in essence. She's not going along, at least at this point. And that she would be killed, that she's not doing things miritzonah. She's fighting. You know, the Ibn Ezra is always a careful, who understands history. He says Daniel had appointed Mordechai as an officer in the Chatzar Malchus. So he was already one of the Mesharsei HaMelech. Some say it was Esther who did that. And that's what he was doing there, the Chatzar HaMelech, because he had been appointed already as an officer there. Pasuk Yud Beis. Uvagia torna ravana ralavola melech Achashverosh. When every girl had her turn. Miketz heyotla kedasan hashnim 12 chodesh, after being treated for 12 months. Kichenim leu yimei perukehan. The prescribed period of time before going to the king was 12 months. 6 months, shisha chadoshim b'shemen amor. 6 months with oil of myrrh. V'shisha chadoshim b'absamim v'samruki anoshim. 6 months with perfumes and feminine cosmetics. So the Manos Halevi, who's a very an Achron who writes a lot of very good things about Megillas Esther, says that the 12 months was a quarantine. They may not have had AIDS, but they had sexually transmitted disease of some type. So he kept them in court. By 12 months, if they had a certain disease, it would show up. You should know that those grandparents who came through Ellis Island, many of them sat in quarantine for 3 months before they would let in Ellis. If you ever visited Ellis Island, so they had barracks where many people were kept there. There was TB rampant in Europe. and other diseases, and they kept them there for a period of time to make sure that once they were allowed into the New York City, they had been quarantined. So some want to say that this 12 months, besides a beauty treatment, it was also quarantine. That if any symptoms of illness would surface, they would see it.
Wonder what the amount of girls came to the Melech altogether.
Well, we hundreds.
So each day, few of them.
Each day, that I would say it could be. It looks like one a day, but maybe more than one a day. In a chanami, in a chanami.
There's another opinion that said there was one young woman chosen from each of the 127 kind of parts of the kingdom. So there were only 127 women, more than enough, I think.
The Ramat Vali says, "Ein dover hamargilas ha'odem le'erva k'mo hareach ha'nodev shel ha'isha mevusemes." There is nothing that stirs the passion of a male more than the odorous perfume that comes from a perfumed woman. So that's why there's such an emphasis on the perfumery. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Just Uvazeh nara bala melech. With this, the girl came. Eis kol asher tomar yinasin la. Whatever she wanted, she was given. Lavo imam beis anashim beis hamel. She asked for jewelry. She asked for a Saint Laurent dress. Whatever she wanted, they gave it to her. Rashi says, when it says Kol Asher Tomar Kol Tzchok Umine Zemer, they had comedians, they had orchestras, they had music. On the day that she would be called to the king, after she prepared herself, it took a whole year. This is the day, the big test. She could be chosen as queen if she's successful, and otherwise she loses her chance. So they wanted to calm her down, make her batuach, make her happy. You could see on her face. So they gave her whatever she wanted. They played music, and they made her laugh, in order that the king should find favor in her. The Ramat Vali says it was like a Caesar's Palace shopping district. Along the way, there were many stores with jewelry and clothing, and she would say, I want this, I want this. They would give it to her. She's going to lose something very valuable, her basulim. So this is in payment of that. Even if she's not chosen by the king, this was the way of the ancient times. There was a value placed to a girl's virginity. And therefore, whatever tachshitim she wanted, that calmed her down. Pasuk Yudalit. Ba'erev hiba. She would come in the evening. Uvavoker hishava. In the morning, she would go back. El Beis Anoshim back. She would go back to the harem, which is a different harem. El Yad Shashgaz, right? The first harem was Haggai. This is Shashgaz, Street Samelech, Shomer HaPilakshim. Because Lo Sava Odel HaMelech. At that point, she would never go back, unless unless she was summoned by name. What's going on here? The custom was that the sharvit that a melech uses, that's the euphemism. Sharvit is a scepter. So any kli that a king uses could not be used by a regular common person, the ordinary folk. Same thing by these women. Having consorted with the king, it would not be proper for any other man to marry them. So they had to stay in that harem for the rest of their lives as concubines, just awaiting being called by the king if he so desired. And that's why, of course, the saris, right? A saris is a man that's been castrated. And they were the ones who occupied themselves in watching the harem. They didn't want men loaded with testosterone to be there. That would also be a problem. Pasuk Tezvav. Uvagia Tor Esther bat Avichail dod Mordechai. Bat Avichail is the uncle of Mordechai, and this is the Bat Avichail. So they were really like first cousins who had adopted her, we said, as a daughter. And according to the other Midrashim, we learned as his wife, not Labas, but Labayas. Lavola Melech, when it came time for Esther to go to the king, Lo Biksha Davar. As opposed to all the other women, she didn't ask anything. Except, Kimet Asher Yomar, Hegai Srisamelech Shemar Nashim. Except what Haggai, who was in charge of the first harem, advised her. Why all of a sudden are we mentioning Esther's family background and her father's name? It's the first time that it's mentioned. It doesn't say when we're introduced. Vahi omena sadasa, he Esther bas Dodo. It doesn't say over there, he Esther bas Avichail. It waited until here to tell us her father's name. Why? And why does it have to be repeated here that Mordechai adopted her? So it's because she was acutely aware that she's Jewish. And that's why she asked for nothing. She had in mind, just like Yosef by Eshes Potiphar, what did Chazal say? He saw Dyukno Shel Yaakov. When he was about to succumb to the temptations of Eshes Potiphar, he saw Dyukno Shel Yaakov. He saw the image of his father. That's what's going on here. She's keeping in mind her father Avichail. And that her adoptive father is Mordechai. And she didn't request any artificial beauty aids. Why? She didn't want to find favor in Achashverosh's eyes. She wants to be rejected and then sent home to her family. I didn't finish the pasuk. Nevertheless, Esther captivated everyone who saw her. Even though she requested none of these beauty aids, her true beauty and grace found favor. The Gemara says, Rav Yehuda says, she was like a statue upon which 1,000 persons look and admire equally. Right? Everybody looks at the Mona Lisa. Everybody has a different take on it, but it's beautiful. Rav Nechemia said they placed Median women and Persian women on either side of her, and she was more beautiful than all of them. The Gemara in Megillah, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph says, everyone thought she was a member of her own people. Like what Bernie said, the 127 provinces, everyone sort of adopted her as their own. She had that kind of chaim. The Gra, throughout Tanakh, he's the only one who is medagdek in the trop. I'm a Balkore. So I always see for example, by Vayigashe Lav Yehuda, Kadma Vazla. He went forward strongly. Yehuda, that's the Kadma Vazla. Kadam, forward, vazla, go. So the Gra even sometimes will understand in a trop a certain meaning. So when we had uvagia tor narav nara, that was kadma vazla. That was, they went forcibly. They went bezrizus because they wanted to be queen. But here the trop is munach revi'i. Ba revi'i ba. That's when it says Esther went, it's very slowly. Munach. She didn't want to go. She made her like a sick. And by the way, the lack of asking for things, for the cosmetics and all that, again, she's unwilling to go to this king. It's an act of onus. She's being forced to do it. So she's certainly not going to, adorn herself. And then, like, we're going to get into this issue that nobody knew what her background was. Part of it was everyone, when they looked at her, thought that she was from their nation. So that's why it was so tricky to figure out who was she from. Maybe that's the Nes Min Hashem. That it was created that way to make it easier for her to hide her identity. Pasuk Tet Zayin. Vatilakach Esther la Melech Achashverosh. Now the word vatilakach doesn't say vilakach. Vatilakach is taken by force. It's an emphasis that she's not going willingly. Vatilakach Esther. El Melech Achashverosh el Beit Malchuto, to his palace. B'chodesh Asiri, Chodesh Teves, B'shna Sheva Malchuso, in the 7th year of the reign. So again, let's remember, the party was in the 3rd year. So the party's in the 3rd year. Then they kill Vashti then. And remember that this process took 12 months. So until they went and gathered the women. So now in the 7th year of Achashverosh's reign is when she becomes queen. When is the story of Purim? In the 12th year, 5 years later. So the events that we're going to discuss, Haman, Mordechai not bowing down, Haman going to the king to write an igeret that they should be destroyed, that happens 5 years later. Just so we know where we are. So the Gemara says, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, why Teves? Yerach Shenene Guf Ben Aguf. Teves is December. It's the winter. It's the coldest month of the year, when bodies warm up other bodies, and therefore the body has more hana. That would make her more desirable for the husband, for Achashverosh. The nights are longer, and that perhaps could have led to Achashverosh falling in love with Esther. Vayehava melech es Esther mikol hanashim. The pasuk testifies to it. He loved Esther more than all the women. Vatisa chen v'chesed. She had grace, or the grace was lifted lifanav, in front of him. He called up to Lot than all the other girls. Vayasam ketra malchut barosha vayamlicheh tachas vash. And therefore he decides to coronate her as queen. The Medrash says that married women had been brought before him. And according to the rabbis who say that Esther was married to Mordechai, remember, it's not everybody, so her claiming to be a married woman wouldn't have saved her. because if the king would only bring in this beauty pageant besulos, then she would have been exempted because she was married. Now, there were other women waiting. Esther wasn't like the last, let's say Bernie's correct that there were 127. She may have been number 30 or number 40. The other basilos that were waiting their turn, once Achashverosh saw Esther, he crowned her as his king and didn't see the other beautiful candidates waiting in the wings. And the Gemara Megillah said that she had the qualities both of a basula and both of a married woman. And the pasuk particularly emphasizes in the place of Vashti, even though Vashti came from Malucha and Esther did, and Achashverosh doesn't know where Esther is from. The Alshich says Achashverosh loved Esther as much as Vashti. And Rashi says, Mikol hanoshim ha'ba'ulos, sha'af noshim ha'ba'ulos kibes. Rashi clearly says that he gathered married women as well. Pasuk Yudches. Vayasa melech mishte gadol. Okay, so this is now 4 years later, after the original Mishteh. He makes a big party. L'chol sarav avadav eis Mishteh Esther. This is I now have a new queen, and this is a party for Esther. V'hanachalam dinos asa. There were amnesties declared for various provinces. Vayitein maseis kiyad hamelech. And he gave gifts worthy of a king. Achashverosh wants to learn the secret of Esther. Where is she from? And the Gemara tells us whatever he did not succeed in getting Esther to tell him where she was from. He did the festivities, she didn't tell him. He gave a reduction in taxes, and it was done in Esther's name, thinking that she would reveal. No. The gifts that the pasuk talks about, that the king sent, was given in her name. Still, she does not reveal.
Ernie, I see a different interpretation here. That the king, can I just read a short paragraph? The king wanted to invite everyone in Shushan, just as he had done at the previous feast. Esther advised him against it. There were many poor people in Shushan, and attending a royal banquet was a tremendous expense. Suitable clothes alone would cost a fortune. Better declare a holiday and let people celebrate at home. And that's the Vahanacha, right? This way, send the people gifts so that they will be able to make their own feast and not have to find a way to afford coming to the royal banquet.
What pasuk is that?
No, this is Yudches. Yudches. Yeah, but that's very good. That's a more pashut pshat of what's going on here. The Gemara Megillah sees it as a methodology, step by step. Achashverosh tried to do different things to draw the secret out of Esther. It's not going to stop there. Yutes. Uvihikavetz psulos shenis. All of a sudden, they now gather new women. What is this all about? So Mordechai gave Achashverosh the following advice. The way to rouse a woman is to make her jealous. And so this was Mordechai's idea, to have another beauty pageant, to make Esther jealous. But still Esther doesn't reveal it. The Me'am Loa says that Achashverosh knew about Daniel being the Jewish advisor to Nebuchadnezzar. So he had, the Medrash says Achashverosh had mentioned to Esther that he wished he had a Jewish advisor like Daniel. So Esther told him, there's a wise man who's a descendant of Shaul HaMelech. He would be a good advisor. And it's at that point that Achashverosh appointed Mordechai to sit at the gate and judge the people. And that's how it came that Mordechai gave advice to Achashverosh. Achashverosh understood Mordechai is a wise man. He's the Beis Din. He's providing, Jewish law for all the Jewish people in Shushan. So Achashverosh took counsel from Mordechai how he could extract from Esther the secret of her origin. So Mordechai said, organize a gathering of beautiful young maidens, and Esther, fearing that she would be replaced as queen, would divulge the secret. Now, what's Mordechai doing here? He wants to know, was the fact that Esther was made queen, is this truly the will of Shammai? If the king, even after the second call of all these girls, finds no one superior to Esther, Mordechai would understand that this is all part of Hashem's plan. That's how the Me'am Loez learns. Here's a question. I don't want to say it about our fellow Jews. The question is, why didn't a self-seeking opportunist, a Jew who knew about Mordechai and Esther, why didn't someone divulge Esther's secret to the king for money? So first of all, I said every nation, the 127 provinces, sort of adopted her as a native son. They all thought she was from us. And therefore, the person wouldn't have been believed. The other thing now is now that Mordechai is on the king's payroll, they would be afraid, because Mordechai is the king's advisor, he would denounce them. And Pasuk Chaf, this is the crux of the matter. Ein Esther magedet moladata v'tama. Esther is telling nothing about where she's from. Mordechai had instructed her to do that. Kasher tzivale Mordechai. Vet mamar Mordechai Esther osa. Esther is obeying Mordechai. Kasher aita b'mnaito, the way he raised, as she obeyed him as a daughter. Even though she was queen, she maintained her connection to him either as a father or as a husband.
What's the purpose not to say the Moladeta?
The story is gonna unfold in a way that we're gonna see. Achashverosh is a Sonei Yisrael, more than Haman, as we're gonna learn. We think that Achashverosh is this, the image when you go to is this drunken fool, and Haman is the evil person. It's not so. Achashverosh is the wicked person. He's a Sonei Yisrael. He never would have married her if he knew she was Jewish. And we're going to see what happens as the story unfolds when he finally finds out that she was Jewish, what happens. But Tzvi, he would never have married her, and he would have killed her if they knew that she was Jewish. So the Sifsei Chachamim asks the question, Valo kama dilaturnai Yisrael. There are Jews who tell Lashon Hara. Why weren't they concerned that one of them will say that she's Jewish? Number one, she was no sechein, and all the umos thought that, so nobody would have believed her. All the Meforshim say it was this big sakana nefashos if she would have revealed where she was. Now the Midrashim say, or the Targum says, when it says Vesmamar Mordechai Esther Osa, she kept Shabbos. Shavu Moadav Niter, she kept Shabbos and Yontif. When she was a Bimei Rechuka Havis Bizdar, when she was a Nida, she didn't have relations. And it says, Tavshilin v'chamra damamin nuchroin lovetayma. She didn't eat or drink non-kosher food. That's what the Targum says is meant by Esmamar Mordechai Esther Osaka Shar Sabam Naito. And that takes a tremendous gvura and chachma and siyata dishmaya that Esther was able to hide all of these things. Her name, Esther, means hidden. And that's what all of this is being done in a hidden way. She was shoymer dinei Torah through this mechanism. The Gemara Megillah says, "Hay samar dam nida l'chachamim." That sometimes women are not sure about the color of the blood that they see. Are they kosher? Are they not kosher? She went to the chachamim. Now, the Monas Alevi points out, who was Mordechai HaYehudi? He's Rav Moshe Feinstein. That's her husband. But there's a halacha. He's a nogeya. Kol hanegoyim adam roeh chutz minigei atzmo v'nigei krovov. Kohanim can look at, in order to say that a nega is tamei, you have to show to the Kohen your lesion, and he paskins, you have a nega or you don't have a nega. You cannot look at your own nega, you cannot look at your relatives' nega. Why? Because you're a nogea bedover. If your husband is a Talmid Chacham, a wife cannot show her maros nida to her husband because he's nogea bedover. He's got a conflict of interest. He has a vested interest to say, oh, it's okay. So she has to go to other people. He was Rosh of the Sanhedrin. Yet, because of her Chasidus, they made sure that she showed it to the other Chachamim.
How old was she?
75.
So she still was Mida and everything?
She had children afterwards.
She had children afterwards. We learned last week, Hadassah is Bigamatra 75. That was her age. I got many questions about that because, she's going to a beauty pageant. She's a 75-year-old woman and she's chosen. But that's, remember, both Mordechai and Esther come to Bavel with Golus Yechonia. Well, that happened 70 years ago. So she might have been an infant then, but 70 years have passed. Remember, Achashverosh takes out those kelim 70 years after Golus Yechonia. So and we know that she came, Chazal tell us, Mordechai came and Esther came with the Golus of Yechonia. So that's the calculation. So Tzvi asks a good question, but we see Sarah Imenu still had children. And again, these things changed, medically at this time, between now and then. There's a very controversial, famous Gemara, Megillah Yud Gimel Amud Beis. When it says Kasher Haisaba Amna Ito, Amar Rava Bar Lema, Haisa Oimeres Mecheko Shel Achashverosh V'Toveles V'Yosheves B'Cheko Shel Mordechai. That means one day she was with Achashverosh, another day she was with Mordechai. So the Tosfos asks the famous question: Vim Tomer V'Lo Yasham Havchana Shloishes Chadoshim. If you someone gets divorced, and you marry a new man, you're not allowed to have relations with him. You have to wait 3 months. And the din is you have to wait 3 months for everybody. Between relations, otherwise we're not going to know who the father is. 3 months, a pregnancy will show. So Tosfos asks on the Gemara, how can you say that she went from Achashverosh to the next day to Mordechai? There's no 3 months. So the Gemara answer, Tosfos answers, Shahaisa mishameshes b'moch. She used like a contraceptive. And the Marsha says she used a contraceptive with Achashverosh. You're not allowed to use a contraceptive if you have relations with your husband, because you're supposed to have children. The Tosfos says later on, when she goes willingly to the king, then she can't have relations anymore with Mordechai. And then she got pregnant from Achashverosh. And that's why we have Daryavesh Hasheni. And there's debate, there's a big pill pool in this whole issue. She's allowed, remember, you're allowed to live with your husband. If a girl is raped, you can live with your husband unless there's a Kohen. But if the husband is not a Kohen, Mordechai is not a Kohen, the Gemara describes Esther's situation as karka oila. She's like the ground. She did not participate. Others say she used the moch with Achashverosh not to feel anything, because otherwise she would participate willingly, and that's a problem because she's got to be in a status of rape. Okay. Pasuk Chafalov. Bayamim ahem uMordechai yoshe b'shar melech. So this was a good thing that Mordechai was appointed by Achashverosh to be the judge for the Jewish people. They came to the gates. He's also being used by Achashverosh as an advisor. He's a wise man. He's from royalty. Kotzov Bigson Vasheresh Shnei Sarisei HaMelech B'Shomrei Asaf. 2 officers, Bigson Vaseresh, got angry at Achashverosh. Vayivakshu lishloach echad b'melech Achashverosh, and they plotted to assassinate Achashverosh. Mordechai was head of the Sanhedrin, but he understands that there's a lot of importance to what's going on at the palace of the king. So he's not hanging out with the Sanhedrin anymore. He's now permanently at the king's gate. Remember, the last pasuk of this sefer, it's going to say, V'ratzui l'rov echav. Mordechai is beloved by some of the people. What does Rashi say there? Because he had left the Sanhedrin. Well, that story begins here, where Mordechai understands his role is more important to be here stationed at the king's gate. He thought he would overhear threats against the Jews, says the Me'am Loez. The king's gate isn't just for idle guyers. The assembly of the dignitaries of the land are assembling at the gate. We see that everywhere in Shoftim and Shmuel, Shar Ha'ir, the gate. That's where king sat. So Mordechai is like Jew number 1 in Shushan. So it's not unusual for the most important dignitary of the Jewish people to be at the gate. I think we all, now when we read the Megillah, we're going to have a better understanding of what's going on in the Megillah. These little details that are given really reflect the whole story and what's happening there. As the most notable Jew, it's okay for him to be by the gate. Now, why did big son Vaseresh get angry? They got angry because Mordechai had been elevated to be the advisor and not them. Vayivadaha davar leMordechai. Now, Bigson Vaseresh came from a place called Tursi, and they spoke Tursi. That's not Persian. We explained before that every Sanhedrin in Klal Yisrael had to have at least 2 members of the Sanhedrin that knew 70 languages. Why do you need that? Because you have Eidim, witnesses, coming in front of Beis Din testifying about all sorts of things. The new moon. Let's say there are Jews traveling from somewhere and they see the new moon and they come to the Beis Din to report on the new moon. Beis Din had to understand the language of whoever's coming to give testimony. Mordechai was, the other name of Mordechai is Mordechai Bilshan. The word Bilshan comes from Lashon, Lamed Shin Nun, Bilshan, because Mordechai spoke 70 languages. And these 2 guys were speaking to each other, not expecting that anyone's going to understand them. But Mordechai is there. Mordechai understands 70 languages. So Mordechai discovers the plot. Vayaged Lester Malka. So Mordechai tells it to Esther. Vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordechai. Esther tells Achashverosh, but he doesn't just tell her, in the name of Mordechai. Oh, you know who overheard this? Who is the source of this information? That's Mordechai. And there's a famous chazal, Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula la'olam. That's whenever we're giving a drasha, or whenever we're speaking Torah, we always, if we heard it in the name of somebody, we quote who we heard it from. And that brings geula to the world. This is learned from this pasuk, that when Esther said over this thing to the king, she said it in the name of Mordechai. Vayuvukasha davar vayimatzeh. So they investigated, and they found that it was correct. Vayitalu shnei hamaletz, and they were hanged. Vayikatev b'sefer divrei yamim lifnei hamelech. And that episode where Mordechai revealed the assassination plot was written in the book of records.
Renee, can I comment on what the Me'am Lo'eh says in English?
Please.
So around this time, war broke out between Persia and Greece. Bigson and Seresh decided to throw their lot with the Greeks, and they felt that if they could deliver Achashverosh's head to them, they would win eternal fame and position. And then in the footnotes, it says, in the time of Darius, a revolt by Ionian Greeks had led to an expedition against the Greek mainland. At that time, the Persians were defeated at the famed Battle of Marathon, a state from which the marathon race gets its name. A state of war continued into the reign of Achashverosh.
Yes, outstanding. It's actually brought from Josephus, that story. And obviously, this is planting the seeds of the Geula, right? That eventually, right, this whole story is going to be brought, Balaylahu, Nadadash Nasa Melech, and Mordechai is going to be elevated even further. Okay.
Ernie, how is it that Esther didn't have any problem approaching the king about this plot, but then when Mordechai came to her and asked her to organize the Seuda with Haman and all that, she said, I wasn't called for 30 days, I can't go. And here it sounds like she's able to go very easily.
Okay, we
to Achashverosh.
lost please repeat what you said, Fagi. You broke up.
That here we see that
The volume is
Esther,
too high. The volume is too high.
we see that Esther was able to go to Achashverosh about this plot against that Mordechai reported without any problem. Whereas when Mordechai approached her to go to Achashverosh in order to save the Jewish people, she said, I can't go because I haven't been called.
Good question. Good question. That's something we'll have to see if anybody talks about that. It's even more than what Bernie said. They had a suspicion that Esther was Jewish. And they were going to do this whole thing with the Greeks. It said they were going to blame it on Mordechai. So they were going to, they were going to get Mordechai as well as part of it. But the Hatzalah for Klal Yisrael is going to come because of the Mordechai being there and overhearing all of this. So Chazal made this principle that if you say something in the name of somebody, that brings geula. How does that work? So when you say something that you had heard from somebody, so this is that comes from the midah of emes. It's not your vort; it's a vort that you heard from somebody else. And therefore, if you don't say it in the name of somebody else, it's looked like you're looking for kavod, for personal kavod. The whole exile is a result of Hester Panim in a world of sheker. So geula will come through the revelation of truth, and if you're connected to the midas ha'emes, that's going to lead to geula. The Lev Eliyahu, Rav Eliyahu Lapian, in the name of the Maral, says he brings from Gidon that, you remember Gidon destroyed Midian with just 300 soldiers, but they were people who would bend down, right? They didn't bend down to lick the water. They brought the water up to them. So you have to recognize a nace is only going to occur through somebody who's going to be makir the nace. So if somebody says something they heard from somebody else, but you say it in your own name, so it's kochiva otzem yadi, and geula is not going to come through that mechanism. Okay, I think we learned Perek Beis in a good way, and we'll start, God willing, Perek Gimel 2 weeks from tonight. Everybody will continue to have a good week, and we'll bring brachas to Eretz Yisrael on behalf of everybody.
Afterwards, Perek Aleph. We did Perek Beis.
We have completed Perek Aleph and Perek Beis. We will start Perek Gimel. So we do some preparation. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in Perek Gimel. I actually did some preparation for Perek Gimel. So there's a lot to say there. Any other comments anybody want to make? Okay.
Have a good week.
Have a good week, everybody.
Well,
Great.